The wind swept across the town square like a memory, pulling at the ends of tattered jackets and shawls and raising the grid in languid spirals. Closing time was almost here. The general store's windows were partially obscured by lamplight and breath, and like a faraway wasp, the faint murmur of gossip pierced the chilly air. Horses snorted from the rail, their hooves moving as though they sensed a calm before thunder as well. B.O. Holston moved steadily along the boardwalk, his boots creaking in a rhythm that only people who have spent too much time alone can understand. A non-smiling face was veiled by the brim of his hat. 34, and as if company might break him, he wore solitude like a second skin. If it weren't for the sound, he might have gone undetected through town, passing the barbers and nodding to no one in particular. The sound that silences a community is a crisp crack. There was a little gasp, heads turning, and then nothing. Both halted in the middle of their stride and turned slowly. She was on the ground already. The woman's hair was loose and twisted. One side of her face was pink where the blow had hit, and her knees were scraping dust after she had fallen close to the well. A tall, sharp-jawed man with a gleaming silver watch chain brushed his palms as if slapping a fly, and then turned away as if she were something he had used up. No one shifted. B.O. did. He moved slowly but steadily across the gap between them, like a man accustomed to being overlooked but not scared of being noticed. The woman didn't raise her head. With one palm bleeding into the ground, she simply inhaled between her teeth. Not in a noble or valiant manner, he bent down near enough for her to see his coat brush against her skirts and his open, calloused, waiting hand. She initially flinched. He did not recoil. A few bystanders whispered behind their hands. "That's Clive Rue's girl," a muttered voice said. "He will return." However, nobody of them spoke. He just gave her the impression that she was important. Not the scar, not the embarrassment, not the onlookers. Slowly and softly her hand touched his. Uneasy, the audience began to breathe once again. Together they emerged from a riverbank like fog and left. Nothing to say, no justification. He slowed to keep up with her changing gait. A kid pointed. He was dragged back by the collar by a woman. With trembling fingers, Clive Roar lighted a cigar behind them while observing Bose's back withdraw into the waning dusk. Nestled amid a bend of cottonwood trees, the cabin was perched on the ridge's edge. The route twisted like a question with no definitive answer. The warmth within welcomed them like a dog when B.O. opened the door. Uncertain of strangers. Not very much. A chair that had stopped laughing, a stove that was still glowing, and shelves that were empty save for beans and dust. He didn't inquire about her name. She didn't inquire about his. Rather, he filled a basin with hot water and presented it to her along with a square of gauze and a bar of lea soap. Then, as if his hands needed to be occupied to keep his heart from getting in the way, he sat at the table and slowly and absently carved wood. She quietly washed, flinching slightly as the cloth came into contact with her cheek. She glanced at the door once. He whispered, "You don't owe me anything," without raising his gaze. When she did speak, it was as dry as cotton. "You think I'm used to men who don't expect things." He didn't respond. In the hearth, the fire flickered faintly. She glanced at her lap. He continued to carve. The wood started to resemble a spoon. Honest, yet not flawless. She slept in his bed that night. He stood up. She questioned whether he was acting honorably. "No," he responded. "In any case, he didn't sleep much anymore." Her voice resurfaced. "In the dark. I spent 3 years with him. Clive, I reasoned that I might be able to soften him if I tried harder." B.O. turned over and looked at the wall. "My sister had that thinking. Quiet. Now, where is she?" "She ain't," he said. The town was alive the following morning. Clive Roar asked the sheriff whether he had seen his woman as he rode his steed up and down the square, jaw tight. All the sheriff knew was that she had walked out of a square on her own 2 legs. The sheriff turned aside when Clive swore. By that time, B.O. was in the field, tilling the earth, which was still too cold for seeds. She allowed it. At last, she informed him while standing on the porch and observing crows circling the hilltop covered in frost. She cooked, cleaned, and sat with him at the pasture's edge while deer passed through the trees without asking for assistance. Even though their hands never touched again, there was a warming sensation in their mutual quiet. She attempted to enter the town on the 6th day, walking the street by herself with her chin up and shoulders back. However, the quiet that greeted her was more profound than any slight. She went unnoticed by the clerk. When she went by, the women at the pump stopped talking. Leedy walked home with the flour bag shielded against her chest. Before she even made it to the cabin, he saw her approaching. Her mouth was squeezed in and her steps were rigid. He didn't inquire. "I just poured coffee and opened the door." She questioned, "You ever get tired of being stared at?" "I became accustomed to being ignored," he remarked. "This is merely the opposing viewpoint." He taught her how to saddle the paint horse that evening. When she mounted clumsily and nearly tipped sideways, she laughed quietly. He did not touch her as he tried to steady her. Her first genuine sound that didn't taste like bruising was that little, startled chuckle. Clive arrived on the 8th day. The path is pounded like fists by the hoofs. Letty became pale when she first heard them. Just as Clive dismounted, both of them left the porch, their feet crunching the cold. "Are you keeping my girlfriend hidden?" He spat. "You don't own her." Clive scoffed. "Do you want her right now?" "That it wants the thin things I've already worn." Bo's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. "Property is not what I want. Peace is what I desire." Clive moved forward. "Do you believe that you are superior?" "To me? No, only more subdued." Although it might have ended there, Clive moved in Leedy's direction, heading for the porch. It made no difference. Bo already had the weapon in his arms. "Just present, not directed," Bo said. "You take another step. Additionally, I'll bury you next to my sister." Like thunder, the words hung. Something in Clive's bluster withered as he turned his gaze from the barrel to the woman. After turning and spitting into the snow, he got on his horse. He didn't turn around. Within an hour, the town learned about it. By evening, people were speculating that perhaps Clive had overreached himself, that Letty might have been more stuck than picked, that Bo Holston might have done something honorable. Leedy watched the snow fall from the window. She questioned, "You mean to keep me here forever?" Bo remained silent. "I could go now," so she turned. "Nobody was going to stop me." "I am aware." She moved in closer. "I won't, though." For the first time, he glanced up at her with possibility rather than sympathy. The stove was glowing. "Will you marry me, Bo Holston?" she said quietly as the wind whispered against the walls like a memory. Without saying a word, he just grasped her hand once more, the one he had picked up from the dust in the town square, and held it as if he had discovered something too sacred to talk over. The snow started to fall more heavily outside. On the inside, however, the world was starting over. A rider, silent as sin, observed them through the trees far from the ridge, past the cottonwoods, his breath rising like smoke.